Somewhere deep in the rivers of South America, in the murky, oxygen-poor waters of the Amazon basin, there is a creature that does something that should not be possible. It generates electricity inside its own body. Not a small, harmless static charge. Not the kind of tingle you get from touching a doorknob on a dry winter day. We are talking about bolts of biological electricity, powerful enough to stun a horse, knock a grown human off their feet, and kill smaller animals outright, without ever making direct physical contact with them. No teeth, no venom, no claws, just electricity, conjured from within, fired through water like a living weapon. This is the electric eel, and before this is over, you will understand exactly why it is one of the most remarkable creatures that has ever evolved on this planet. If you find yourself genuinely fascinated by the hidden machinery of the natural world, by the extraordinary science buried inside ordinary-looking animals, then stay with this until the end. And if you want more of this, subscribe now, because what lives in the wild is always stranger than anything we could invent. Now, let us start with something fundamental, something that makes the electric eel's story so much richer when you understand it from the very beginning. The electric eel is not actually an eel. This matters, because the name causes people to file it away in the wrong mental folder. They picture a slippery eel-like fish, related to the moray or the conger, and they move on. But the electric eel is not related to any of those animals. Its closest living relatives are actually the carp and the catfish. It belongs to a group called the Gymnotiformes, the knife fish, a fascinating order of freshwater fish found almost exclusively in South and Central America. The electric eel, Electrophorus electricus, was simply named for its shape and its habit of living in waterways, but calling it an eel is like calling a dolphin a fish. The superficial appearance is there. The underlying biology is something else entirely. Now, with that corrected, let us ask the real question. How does any living thing generate electricity powerful enough to stun animals without even touching them? The answer requires us to go deep inside the body of this animal, right down to the cellular level, because the electric eel's secret is written into the architecture of its cells. The electric eel's body is long. A fully grown adult can reach 2.5 meters in length, roughly the height of a very tall man stretched horizontal. But here is what is extraordinary about that body. Nearly 80% of it is dedicated to electricity generation. The internal organs, the stomach, the heart, the reproductive organs, these are all crammed into the front fifth of the animal, just behind the head. Everything else, the vast, trailing length of the body from just behind the head all the way to the tail, is essentially a living battery. A biological power plant wrapped in muscle and skin. Inside that body, there are 3 pairs of electric organs, each one with its own unique function and its own voltage output. These organs are called the main organ, the hunter's organ, and the Sachs organ. Together, they contain roughly 6,000 individual units called electrocytes, and it is these electrocytes that hold the secret to one of nature's most astonishing abilities. Think about what an electrocyte actually is. Each one is a flattened, disc-like cell, stacked in long rows like coins in a cylinder. Each cell is capable of generating a small electrical charge, somewhere around 150 millivolts, by selectively pumping sodium and potassium ions across its membrane. This is a process called ion transport, and in one form or another, every single cell in every living animal does something similar. The electrical signals in your own brain and nerve fibers work by exactly this mechanism. The difference is scale. In most animals, these tiny cellular charges are used to send nerve signals. In the electric eel, evolution has taken this basic cellular tool and amplified it to an almost unimaginable degree. The electrocytes are arranged in series, stacked end to end like the cells in an ordinary battery. When the eel's brain sends the signal to fire, all 6,000 electrocytes discharge simultaneously, and each tiny individual charge adds to the next, and the next, and the next, all the way down the length of the body. The result is a combined voltage that can exceed 860 volts. For context, a standard household electrical outlet in the United States delivers 120 volts. The electric eel can generate more than 7 times that. And while the current, the amperage, is relatively low compared to household electricity, at around 1 ampere, it is still more than sufficient to cause severe muscle contractions, unconsciousness, or death in a smaller animal. This is, by any measure, one of the most powerful electrical outputs ever recorded in a living organism. And what makes it even more extraordinary is that the electric eel is not simply storing this charge passively and releasing it like a capacitor. It is actively generating it, on demand, in real time, coordinated by its nervous system with remarkable precision. But let us stay with the mechanics for a moment longer, because the system is even more elegant than a simple comparison to a battery suggests. Water, particularly the murky, mineral-rich water of the Amazon basin, is an excellent conductor of electricity. When the electric eel discharges its electric organs, the current flows out of its body through the water surrounding it, completes a circuit through any conductive object in the vicinity, and returns to the eel's body at a different point. If there is an animal in that water, the current passes through that animal's body. The muscles contract involuntarily, the nervous system is overwhelmed, the prey is stunned, paralyzed, or killed, depending on the strength and duration of the discharge. This is how an electric eel can stun a fish without touching it. The water itself becomes the weapon. The eel fires its biological battery through the surrounding medium, and anything conductive in that medium becomes part of the circuit. Distance matters, of course. The further away an animal is, the more the electrical charge dissipates in the water, and the weaker the shock it receives. But within a range of a few meters, the discharge is devastatingly effective. Even on land, an electric eel discharged into shallow water creates a danger zone, extending well beyond its physical reach. And here is something that took researchers a surprisingly long time to document properly. The electric eel does not just use one kind of discharge. It uses electricity in at least 3 completely distinct ways, each serving a different biological purpose. The weakest of these, generated by the Sachs organ, is a very low-voltage pulse, usually around 10 volts or less. The eel uses this almost constantly, in the same way that bats use echolocation. It fires these low-level pulses into the water around it and detects distortions in the resulting electric field using specialized sensory cells in its skin called electroreceptors. Through this mechanism, the eel can sense the presence, size, shape, and movement of other objects in the water, without needing to see them. In the turbid, light-starved waters of the Amazon, where visibility can be measured in centimeters, this is an invaluable sense. The eel essentially builds a continuous, real-time electrical map of its surroundings. The second type of discharge is a series of low-amplitude pulses used during hunting, before the final strike. Recent research has shown that the eel uses these pulses to remotely activate the motor neurons of hidden prey, causing involuntary muscle twitches. The prey fish, buried in sediment or hiding under a log, flinches involuntarily, revealing its exact location through the tiny electrical signals its own moving muscles generate. It is a staggering piece of biological strategy. The eel uses its own electric field to essentially interrogate the environment, to force hidden animals to betray themselves, before it ever commits to an attack. The third type of discharge is the high-voltage strike itself. This is generated by the main organ and the hunter's organ working in concert, and it is used for 2 purposes: subduing prey and self-defense. During hunting, the eel typically delivers a series of rapid high-voltage pulses in quick succession, a volley of electrical strikes that causes the prey's muscles to go into tetanic contraction, a sustained, involuntary cramp that renders the animal unable to swim, unable to flee, unable to do anything except float helplessly until the eel swallows it. In a defense scenario, when a large animal wades into the eel's territory, the response can be even more dramatic. Research published in 2016 by biologist Kenneth Catania at Vanderbilt University documented something completely unexpected. When a large threat approaches, the electric eel sometimes performs a behavior that had never been formally described before. It lunges upward, out of the water, pressing its chin directly against the threat, and then discharges. By doing this, the eel increases the efficiency of its electrical delivery to the target dramatically. When it fires through water, much of the electrical energy dissipates in all directions. But by pressing its electrical organs directly against a threat, it focuses the charge, maximizing the voltage delivered to the specific threat. Catania calculated that by doing this, the eel increases the shock delivered to the threatening animal by nearly 80% compared to the same discharge made through water. Catania's work revealed that this behavior is not random or accidental. It is a precise, calibrated defensive strategy. The eel adjusts the angle and force of its lunge based on the size and position of the threat. It appears to have some capacity to evaluate the threat and respond proportionately. This is not mindless, reflexive behavior. It is something more sophisticated, something that speaks to the behavioral complexity hidden inside an animal that people often dismiss as a simple shock machine. Now an obvious question. If the electric eel can produce 860 volts, why does it not electrocute itself? This is one of the most elegant aspects of its biology. The electrocytes are arranged so that the electrical current flows in a specific direction through the eel's body, from its tail toward its head. The eel's own vital organs are positioned away from the path of strongest current flow. The nervous tissue and organs in the front fifth of the body are not exposed to the full voltage the way an external animal in the water would be. Additionally, the resistance of the eel's own internal tissues is relatively high, which means that while a significant voltage is generated, the current flowing through its own body is much lower than the current that flows through the surrounding water. The eel essentially routes the electricity outward, through the water, where it does its work, rather than inward, through its own tissues. There is also an important distinction to understand here. Voltage is the electrical potential, the pressure driving the current. Current, measured in amperes, is the actual flow of electrical charge. It is the current flowing through the body that causes most of the damage in an electrocution. High voltage with very low current can be uncomfortable but non-lethal. Lower voltage with high current is what is dangerous to living tissue. The electric eel produces very high voltage but relatively low sustained current, which means it can generate enormous electrical potential without the sustained flow of current through its own tissues that would cause self-harm. But there is more to this story. Because the question of how the electric eel evolved is almost as remarkable as the question of what it does. Evolution works through random mutation and natural selection. Beneficial mutations that help an organism survive and reproduce are passed on. Harmful ones are eliminated. Neutral ones persist or disappear by chance. Given this process, how does something as specific and seemingly improbable as a biological electric organ evolve? The answer reveals something beautiful about the mechanics of evolutionary change. The electric organ of the electric eel, and of all electric fish for that matter, evolved from muscle tissue. This is known because the electrocytes themselves are structurally very similar to muscle cells, and during the embryonic development of electric fish, the cells that will become electrocytes begin developing as muscle cells before differentiating along a different path. The genetic toolkit used to build electrocytes is largely the same toolkit used to build muscle. Evolution did not invent a new mechanism from scratch. It modified an existing one. The story begins with a basic fact about all muscle cells. Muscle cells work by generating an electrical potential across their membranes, which triggers the physical contraction of protein filaments inside the cell. This electrical potential is generated by pumping ions across the membrane, and it produces a small voltage, measurable and real. In ordinary muscle, this electrical activity is a means to an end. The end is mechanical movement. But sometime in the deep past, in the lineage that would give rise to fish like the electric eel, mutations arose that caused some of these muscle cells to stop contracting physically while retaining and amplifying their electrical generating capacity. A muscle cell that no longer contracts but generates electricity more powerfully is an electrocyte, and once even a small cluster of such cells existed, the advantages would have been immediate. Even a faint electric field detection capability, or even a mild electrical deterrent to a predator, would have had survival value. Natural selection would have favored individuals with more of these cells, arranged more efficiently, capable of generating stronger fields. Over millions of years, through incremental steps, each one slightly more powerful than the last, the extraordinary three-organ system of the electric eel emerged. Strikingly, this evolutionary journey appears to have happened not once, but multiple times independently, in different lineages of fish. There are roughly 350 species of fish capable of generating electric fields, spread across several different evolutionary families. These include the electric rays, the elephant fish of Africa, the black ghost knifefish, the electric catfish, and of course, the electric eel. In each case, electric organs evolved separately from muscle tissue, through convergent evolution, arriving at similar solutions to similar problems through completely different paths. The fact that nature stumbled upon the same solution so many times tells us something important. The advantages of biological electricity generation are so substantial in terms of sensing, communicating, and subduing prey that once a lineage stumbled onto the basic mechanism, selection drove it forward relentlessly. Now, let us spend some time in the world where the electric eel actually lives, because the environment it inhabits shapes everything about its biology in ways that are deeply instructive. The Amazon basin covers approximately 7 million square kilometers of South America. Through it flows the largest river system on Earth by volume, a vast interconnected network of rivers, tributaries, flooded forests, oxbow lakes, and seasonal wetlands. During the wet season, enormous areas of forest flood completely, with water rising as much as 10 to 12 meters above dry season levels. During the dry season, rivers contract, pools shrink, and some areas are left almost completely isolated from the main river channels. The water of the Amazon system comes in several types: clear water rivers, black water rivers stained dark by tannic acids from decomposing vegetation, and whitewater rivers carrying suspended sediments from the Andes. In almost all of these water types, visibility is extremely limited. The murky, tannin-stained waters of a typical Amazonian creek might offer visibility of a few centimeters on a good day, and essentially zero in many conditions. This is not a world built for visual hunters. Animals that depend on sight to find food would struggle enormously in this environment. The electric eel is supremely adapted to this world. Its constant low-voltage electrolocation means that darkness and turbidity are irrelevant. It does not need to see its prey. It feels them through the electric field it generates and maintains around its body at all times. It can detect the faint bioelectrical signals generated by the muscles and nerves of other animals. A fish hiding motionless in the silt, invisible to any eye, is instantly apparent to the electric eel's electroreceptive system as a pocket of altered electrical resistance. There is another extraordinary adaptation to the low oxygen conditions of Amazonian waters. The Amazon basin is notorious for oxygen-depleted water, particularly in the still, warm, vegetation-choked pools and side channels where electric eels prefer to live. Most fish in such environments face a constant physiological crisis. They need dissolved oxygen to breathe through their gills, and in these waters, dissolved oxygen can be desperately scarce. The electric eel has circumvented this problem with an anatomical modification so profound that it has essentially reinvented its own respiratory system. It breathes air. An electric eel must surface every few minutes to gulp air at the surface, extracting oxygen not through its gills but through a highly vascularized region of its mouth lining that functions as a primitive lung. In fact, approximately 80% of the oxygen the electric eel uses comes from this aerial respiration rather than from the water around it. The gills are still present and functional, but they are not the primary respiratory organ. They are almost supplementary. This air-breathing habit is why you can often find electric eels in water that would be uninhabitable for most other fish, in stagnant, oxygen-depleted pools and backwaters where there are simply fewer competitors. By accepting the need to surface periodically, the electric eel gains exclusive access to aquatic environments that its prey cannot escape and its competitors cannot enter. It is a remarkable ecological strategy, trading one constraint for an enormous competitive advantage. The electric eel's preference for these oxygen-poor, murky, sheltered waters also means it tends to be a relatively slow-moving animal for much of the time. It does not need to be fast. It does not need to chase its prey at high speed through open water. It navigates through tangled root systems and flooded vegetation using its electrosense to map its environment in 3 dimensions, and when it locates prey, it does not need to physically overpower it. It simply discharges, and the prey is incapacitated. The actual capture is almost anticlimactic. The hard work has already been done by electricity. A hunting sequence, as documented by researchers watching electric eels in controlled conditions, unfolds something like this. The eel moves slowly through the water, continuously broadcasting its low-voltage electrolocation pulses. When it detects a disturbance in its electric field that suggests a potential prey animal, it switches to the interrogation phase, emitting low-amplitude doublet pulses that cause involuntary muscle twitches in hidden fish. The twitching fish reveals itself through its own movement and the tiny electrical signals this generates. The eel then orients precisely toward the prey, closes to within a short distance, and delivers a rapid volley of high-voltage discharges, typically at a rate of around 400 pulses per second. The prey fish goes rigid, its muscles locked in tetanic contraction, and floats or sinks helplessly. The eel then maneuvers to swallow it headfirst. The entire sequence, from detection to capture, can take less than a second for small prey. For larger prey, the eel may need to deliver multiple volleys, but the fundamental sequence remains the same. Electrolocation, identification, forced betrayal, high-voltage incapacitation, consumption. It is devastatingly efficient, and it works equally well in absolute darkness, in complete turbidity, and across the full range of Amazonian water conditions. Now, one of the most important scientific developments in the study of electric eels in recent years is the discovery of not one, but 3 separate species of electric eel, which were all previously lumped together under the single name Electrophorus electricus. The revised classification, published in 2019 by a team led by C. David DeSantana of the Smithsonian Institution, established that what we had been calling a single species was actually a complex of 3 distinct species, each with its own range, habitat preferences, and electrical capabilities. The newly described species, Electrophorus voltae, named in honor of Alessandro Volta, the Italian physicist who invented the battery, was found to be capable of producing discharges of 860 volts, significantly higher than the previously recorded maximum, and now the highest bioelectrical discharge ever documented from any living animal. Electrophorus voltae inhabits the Brazilian Shield, a region of ancient crystalline rock that produces clear, highly resistive water. The high resistance of this water means that electrical signals dissipate more quickly, and it appears that over evolutionary time, populations in this environment have been under pressure to generate stronger discharges to compensate, resulting in the extraordinary voltages that Electrophorus voltae is capable of producing. This finding reshapes our understanding of how environmental pressures drive the evolution of electrical ability. It is not a single fixed solution. It is a dynamic capability tuned by natural selection to the specific electrical properties of the local water, in the same way that an engineer might tune the output of a transmitter to match the properties of the medium through which the signal must travel. The discovery of 3 species where one was previously thought to exist is a reminder of something important about the natural world. We are still discovering fundamental things about animals that have been studied for centuries. The electric eel has been known to science since the 18th century. It was studied by Alexander von Humboldt during his legendary journeys through South America. Humboldt's account of watching indigenous fishermen drive horses into a pool containing electric eels to exhaust their charge before catching them remains one of the most vivid early descriptions of the eel's power. And yet, in 2019, we discovered that the species he described was actually 3 separate species, one of them capable of higher voltages than anything previously measured in living biology. The natural world continues to exceed our understanding of it. Let us talk about reproduction, because the electric eel's approach to raising its young reveals a behavioral sophistication that is often overlooked in the fascination with its electrical abilities. Male electric eels build nests. During the dry season, when water levels drop and many pools become isolated, male eels construct nests made from their own saliva in sheltered locations. The female deposits eggs into these nests, and the male guards them. What is remarkable about this arrangement is the degree of paternal investment involved. The male electric eel is an attentive guardian. He watches over the eggs through their development and continues to protect the hatchlings for a period after they emerge. In some documented cases, hundreds of hatchlings have been found sheltering around a single large male, who presumably fathered them. The male's electrical abilities are clearly part of his defensive repertoire during this period. Any fish or aquatic animal that ventures too close to the nest does so at considerable risk. The male can detect the approach of a potential predator through his electrolocation system and respond with a defensive discharge before physical contact is made. The nest itself is effectively surrounded by an invisible electrical perimeter. What is also fascinating about the reproduction of electric eels is what happens when food is scarce in the pool. The hatchlings that do not receive enough external food will begin to prey upon other hatchlings, and in some cases, they are reported to consume the unfertilized eggs from subsequent spawning events. The electrical systems of hatchling electric eels are functional from birth, though obviously far less powerful than in adults. Young eels are capable of delivering small but effective shocks from a very early age, and they appear to use their electrolocation abilities from the very beginning to navigate and interact with their siblings and their environment. The fact that hatchling eels are born electrically active raises an interesting developmental question that researchers are still working to fully understand. The development of 6,000 coordinated electrocytes, all of which need to fire in precise synchrony to produce a coherent electrical discharge, is a remarkable developmental achievement. The nervous system pathways that coordinate this firing are established during embryonic development, and they appear to be functional by the time the animal hatches. The developmental biology of the electric organ is an active area of research, and what emerges from it continues to challenge our understanding of how complex biological systems are built. Now, there is a question that many people ask when they first learn about the electric eel's capabilities, and it is a fair one. Does the electricity hurt the eel when it fires? Does each discharge cost it something? The answer is nuanced. The discharge itself does not appear to be painful to the eel. The electrocytes are designed to generate and discharge electrical potential, and they do so efficiently and without damage to themselves. However, the discharge does have a metabolic cost. Generating and replenishing the ion gradients across the electrocyte membranes requires energy, specifically, the energy stored in the molecule adenosine triphosphate. After a prolonged series of discharges, the eel's electrical output will decline as the ion gradients are depleted and must be re-established. This is why Humboldt's account of driving horses into the pool was effective as a collection strategy. By provoking the eels into repeated high-voltage discharges, the horses exhausted the eel's electrical reserves, making them temporarily less dangerous to handle. The recovery time depends on the intensity and duration of the discharging. A single brief discharge is replenished almost instantly. A prolonged series of maximum output volleys, as in an extended defense against a large threat, takes longer to recover from. This energetic constraint means that the eel does not discharge frivolously. The low-voltage electrolocation and interrogation pulses are energetically cheap and can be maintained essentially continuously. The high-voltage discharges are deployed selectively, when needed, as a precise tool rather than a continuously blazing weapon. There is also significant research interest in the possible applications of electric eel biology to human technology. The challenge of generating electricity from biological processes, of building soft, flexible, implantable, or wearable power sources inspired by the electrocyte, is one that engineers and biologists have been working on together for several years. The electrocyte represents millions of years of optimization toward a specific goal, generating large voltages from the controlled movement of ions across membranes. This is precisely the mechanism used in many of the most promising next-generation battery and fuel cell technologies. In 2017, a team of researchers published a paper in Nature describing the development of an artificial electrocyte system based on a hydrogel material, capable of producing voltages comparable to those of biological electrocytes through the same selective ion transport mechanism. While the practical applications of such systems are still in the early stages of development, the electric eel serves as both inspiration and proof of concept that biological electricity generation at meaningful scales is achievable. Nature solved this problem already. Researchers are working to understand how, and then apply that solution. There is also growing research into the electric eel's electroreceptive system, the ability to sense electric fields, as a model for new types of sensors. Electroreception of the type used by the electric eel and other weakly electric fish is extraordinarily sensitive. These animals can detect changes in electrical field strength equivalent to detecting a gradient of 1/millionth of a volt per centimeter. This level of sensitivity, combined with the spatial resolution provided by the distribution of electroreceptors across the body surface, creates a sensory capability that has no current man-made equivalent in terms of sensitivity per unit size and energy consumption. Engineers interested in designing sensitive, low-power environmental sensors are studying the architecture of electroreceptive systems in fish as a potential design template. Beyond the purely technological applications, the study of electric fish has contributed enormously to our fundamental understanding of neuroscience. Because the electrical communication signals of weakly electric fish, their waveforms, their frequencies, and their modulations are so precisely controlled and so easily measurable, these fish have been powerful model systems for studying how the brain processes sensory information and generates behavioral outputs. Much of what we understand about how neural circuits process sensory signals and generate coordinated behavioral responses has been built on work done in electric fish, particularly the gymnotid knifefish and the mormyrid fish of Africa. The electric eel, as the most extreme member of this broader group, occupies a special place in this research tradition as both the most dramatic exemplar of what biological electricity can achieve and as a window into the evolutionary forces that drove its development. Let us now return to the animal itself and spend some time with the reality of encountering an electric eel in its natural environment, because the lived experience of these animals, both for themselves and for the other animals that share their world, is worth contemplating. The flooded forests of the Amazon during the wet season are extraordinary places. Trees that in the dry season stand on solid ground are now standing knee-deep, waist-deep, sometimes shoulder-deep in water. The forest floor is submerged, and with it, countless insects, spiders, and small vertebrates that could not escape. Fish move through the forest, among the roots and fallen branches, exploiting this seasonal bonanza of food. Caimans cruise through the flooded trees, river dolphins push into the forest to hunt, and among all of this, the electric eel moves with a quiet authority that is quite unlike any other predator in the system. Other predators in the Amazon rely on speed, strength, concealment, venom, or sensory acuity to catch their prey. The electric eel relies on none of these in the conventional sense. It does not need to be fast, because the prey cannot escape once the discharge begins. It does not need to be strong, because the electricity does the immobilizing. It does not need concealment, because its prey cannot see it coming anyway in the murky water. And even if they could, they would have no way to flee an electrical discharge faster than the discharge itself travels through the surrounding water. The electric eel moves through its world with a kind of effortless dominance, a predator for whom the act of hunting has been reduced to its most efficient possible form. What other animals make of the electric eel is difficult to know precisely, but the behavioral responses of species that share its environment are informative. River dolphins, which are well adapted to the murky Amazonian waters and are themselves formidable predators, are generally observed to give electric eels a wide berth. Caimans, which will eat almost anything they can catch, appear to approach electric eels with notable caution. Even large predatory fish, like the Amazonian giant Arapama, one of the largest freshwater fish in the world, are documented to avoid electric eels. The eel's electrical deterrent creates an effective zone of safety around it in an environment filled with animals that would otherwise present a threat. This points to something important about the evolution of the electric eel's high-voltage system. The extremely powerful discharges, particularly those in the 800-volt range, are likely as much about self-defense as about prey capture. A 2.5-meter electric eel is itself a substantial animal, but the waters it inhabits contain caimans, large snakes like the anaconda, large predatory fish, and other formidable threats. The ability to deliver an 800-volt shock not merely through water at a distance, but, as Catania documented, by physically pressing against an attacker and directing the discharge, makes the electric eel a genuinely dangerous animal to attack. Most predators quickly learn that the initial sensation of an electric eel's discharge is best not repeated, and they adjust their behavior accordingly. There is a famous and instructive account from the 19th century, documented by multiple observers, of what happens when a group of horses or mules is driven into water containing electric eels. The eels discharge in response to the disturbance. The horses convulse, struggle to keep their heads above water, and some drown if the eels continue discharging. This account, first brought to broad scientific attention by Humboldt, was doubted by some European scientists of the time, who found it implausible that a fish could produce electrical forces sufficient to kill a horse. We now know not only that it is possible, but precisely why. The shallow water of the pool creates a confined conductive medium. The horses, as large conductive bodies, present a significant load for the electrical current to flow through. Multiple eels discharging simultaneously compound the effect. The physics are entirely consistent with killing or severely incapacitating a large mammal. For human beings, an electric eel represents a genuine danger. A full discharge from a large electrophorus volti at close range in water could kill a person, particularly if the shock causes loss of consciousness leading to drowning, or if it triggers cardiac arrhythmia in someone with a vulnerable heart. Even discharges that do not kill can cause significant muscle trauma, disorientation, and loss of motor control, sufficient to be dangerous in an aquatic environment. Researchers who work with electric eels describe the experience of being accidentally discharged upon as anything from deeply unpleasant to temporarily incapacitating, depending on the size of the animal and the proximity of the contact. Local people in Amazonian communities have lived alongside electric eels for thousands of years and have developed a sophisticated practical understanding of their behavior and their dangers. Traditional fishing methods often involve care to avoid disturbing areas where electric eels are known to be active. The electric eel is not an animal that human communities along the Amazon treat with indifference. It is respected, cautiously navigated around, and in many communities, features in local stories and belief systems in ways that reflect its genuinely formidable nature. What is scientifically remarkable is not just the voltage the electric eel produces, but the precision with which it manages that voltage across the different tasks it needs electrical power for. The transition from the microvolt level signals used in electroreception to the 100-volt pulses used in prey interrogation to the 800-volt strikes used in immobilization or defense represents an extraordinary range of electrical modulation, all managed through a single integrated biological system controlled by the brain. The neural circuitry that manages this, that decides when to switch from sensing to hunting to defending, that calibrates the voltage and frequency of discharge in real time based on what the eel is experiencing, is a masterpiece of biological engineering that we are still only beginning to understand. Recent research using high-speed video combined with simultaneous electrical recordings has revealed layers of behavioral sophistication in the electric eel's hunting that were previously invisible to researchers watching with the naked eye. The speed of the hunting sequence, the precision of the timing between the interrogation pulses and the high-voltage strike, the way the eel adjusts its body position to maximize the efficiency of its discharge given the position of the prey, all of these happen in fractions of a second, in darkness, in turbid water. This is not simple reflexive behavior. It involves the integration of sensory input, the computation of a behavioral strategy, and the precise motor execution of that strategy, all at a speed that makes it invisible without high-speed recording equipment. The electric eel is, in this sense, a reminder that behavioral sophistication is not the exclusive province of animals with large brains. The electric eel's brain is modest. Its nervous system allocates enormous resources to the generation and perception of electrical signals, rather than to the complex social reasoning of a mammal or a bird. And yet within its own ecological niche, within the specific set of challenges that its environment presents, it has evolved a response that is as precise, as flexible, and as effective as any strategy deployed by any predator on Earth. There is one final thing worth dwelling on, because it brings the whole story back to a question that matters beyond the biology itself. We are at a moment in history when the Amazon basin, the only place on Earth where the electric eel exists in the wild, faces pressures of a scale and speed that are genuinely alarming. Deforestation, driven by agriculture, cattle ranching, illegal mining, and infrastructure development, is removing the forest cover that maintains the hydrological cycle of the Amazon. When the forest goes, the rivers change. The seasonal flooding patterns that define the ecosystem, that create the flooded forest habitat that the electric eel and thousands of other species depend upon, are disrupted. Water quality degrades. Mercury contamination from illegal gold mining is now detected in fish throughout large sections of the Amazon, with profound consequences for every animal in the food web. Climate change compounds all of these pressures, altering rainfall patterns, increasing the frequency and severity of droughts, and raising water temperatures in ways that affect dissolved oxygen levels and biological processes throughout the system. The electric eel is not currently listed as endangered. Its wide distribution across the Amazon basin and its adaptability to a range of aquatic environments give it some resilience. But resilience is not immunity. Every species in the Amazon depends on the ecological integrity of the system as a whole, and that integrity is being compromised faster than at any point in recorded history. The extraordinary biological machinery inside the electric eel, hundreds of millions of years in the making, refined through countless generations of evolution, expressed in every cell and circuit of this remarkable animal, exists only in this one place on Earth. Understanding what that machinery is, how it works, what it reveals about the possibilities embedded in living systems, these are not merely academic questions. They are questions that connect us to what is at stake. An animal that can generate 860 volts of biological electricity, that can stun prey without touching it, that can interrogate its environment through electric fields, that inspired the design of the voltaic pile, and continues to inspire battery research, electroreceptive sensor design, and fundamental neuroscience. This animal is irreplaceable. Not just as a species in an ecological sense, but as a working example of what evolution can do over deep time, and as a source of knowledge and inspiration that we have only begun to tap. The electric eel does not know any of this. It moves through its dark, warm, tangled world, with its electrical field spread around it like a constant conversation with the water, sensing everything, revealing nothing. A living battery moving through a conductive medium, doing what hundreds of millions of years of selection shaped it to do, with a perfection that no human engineer has yet matched, and that we would do well to ensure persists into the future, so that there is more left to learn from it than we have yet understood.